Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Burke Mountain Resort and the first annual Forest Products Industry Network. And thank you all for coming. I think it's great that you're all here. The fact that we have close to 150 people, it says a lot, and I think it's just tremendous that everybody is here. My name is Joe Nelson. I'm a consulting forester. I live in Ferrisburg, and I'm on the Working Lands Enterprise Board. I'm the chair of the Forestry Committee. The Working Lands Enterprise Board is a state-funded organization that gives grants to working landscape enterprises, including agriculture and forestry. And we've been doing it since 2012. In 2014, the Forestry Committee was formed, and we really focused on the forest industry side of things. And we spent a lot of effort back in 2014 and 15 to put together a forest systems analysis. We had a summit in 2016, I believe. And that's sort of the start, and that has gotten us to here. I'm really excited about this. I think it's great. I see lots of folks here from all across the value chain, from forest landowners, foresters, loggers, truckers, primary mill owners, all the way through to furniture makers and craftsmen. And I think that's really great. We also have funders, we have architects. So it's a great turnout. Really, thank you all for coming. So last night, we had, most of you were here last night. You heard Craig Rawlings give us a great talk. And Craig, thank you for that. I think it was a great way to set us up for today. It's perfect. I'd also like to note that Governor Phil Scott is with us today, and thank you for coming. And I think it says a lot that the governor has made the effort to come here and be here today. He got here early. He's going to be here through the morning. He will be giving us some remarks later on this morning and signing a few bills. Thank you for coming. I think it says a lot about the commitment of the state. So this event officially launches the Vermont Forest Industry Network. As I said, it really started in 2014. We've gotten to this point. The grants that the Enterprise Initiative has given out, I think, are starting to make a difference. I realize that they're small. We're touching a lot of small organizations, both agriculture and forestry. But we've been doing it now this is the 7th year, and I believe it's starting to make a difference. All those little small pieces are starting to make for some gains, and it's building momentum. And I know there's a lot of folks in here who have received the grants. Some of them will be speaking and talking about how those grants have helped them and how it's helped their business move forward. One of the grants that we awarded in 2017 was to the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund to launch this network. They received funding from several other organizations, and they've really taken off with this. And I talked to Ellen Kaler. She's the executive director of the Jobs Fund, and she says that they're in it for the long run. And so this network that they are really launching, with some help from the Forestry Committee, I think is really going to make a difference. And so Christine McGowan is over here in the corner, and she's the one who basically put this event together. So thank you, Christine. Well, I'm supposed to tell you about a few housekeeping items. One thing is in your bag, pull mine out, you've got what's called a passport. Somewhere in my back pocket, or maybe it's in my bag, but everybody has a passport. We encourage you to go visit all of the exhibitors. You get a stamp, and if you get, I think it's 10 stamps, you'll automatically get enrolled into a raffle, and there are some great prizes. An Andrew Pierce Bowl $100 gift certificate to Spooner Specialties, $100 gift certificate to Harvest Equipment. So please, we encourage you to go visit those vendors and those exhibits. And while you're there, get a stamp. You'll also find in your bag some great items from some of the trade organizations here in the state that have helped us with this event, including the Vermont Woodlands Association, Vermont Forest Products Association, the Vermont Woodworks Council, and Renewable Energy of Vermont. And I want to thank all of those organizations for helping us with this event today and also for helping with our industry. Thank you. I'm the chair of the Forestry Committee of Working Lands Enterprise Board, but there's a lot of other members that help and are involved, and I think there's several of them here, and if those other members of the Forestry Committee could stand up. I think there's a couple in here. Yeah. They've been great. Thank you all. So now I'm pleased to introduce our plenary panel. The topic, the title of the plenary is Forests of the Future, Taking the Long View. And we have with us Katie Fernholz, sitting over there on the right. She is the Executive Director of Dovetail Partners out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have Craig Rollins, who many of you met last night. He is the CEO of the Forest Business Network out of Missoula, Montana. We have Michael Snyder, who is the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. And we have Alex Barrett, a forester with Longview Forest Management in Westminster, Vermont. And the moderator of the panel is Sean Ross. Sean is the Director of Forestry Operations and Managing Director of Lime Timber Company out of Hanover, New Hampshire. And before I pass it over to you, Sean, I just wanted to mention, and I mentioned this last night, that we have, I think, 3 of the panelists are from out of state, and I know there's a lot of other folks here in the room that are from out of state. And even though this is the Vermont Forest Industry Summit, it's important to note that we're not in this, we don't have borders, we don't have a wall around our state. We work with and we rely upon all the neighboring states, and this is an effort. And I know in Maine especially, there's a very similar effort, and I've talked to one of the folks that is involved in that. So shout out to all the folks from out of state, because we're all in this together. So, Sean,
thanks,
all
Joe.
yours.
Great, appreciate it. Mike, I'll give this to you. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. This morning we had in mind about an hour or so kind of sitting around having a cup of coffee talking about the future of Vermont's forests. I think I was asked to be the moderator because those of you who know me know that I don't have a lot of answers, but I'm pretty good at asking questions. So that's going to be my role here. And how I'd like to start is I'd like each of you to give a little bit more background on you personally, and also touch on kind of what you see, your desired future condition of Vermont's forests. Also, not just the forest, but kind of the forest economy. So Alex, why don't we start with you, and we'll come down this way.
All right, is this working? Great, well, it's awesome to be here. I'm Alex Barrett. I'm a consulting forester in Westminster. I manage a couple other foresters at our company, and our company, Longview Forest, is an integrated company. We're about 25 people, and our main focus is growing quality trees and getting really excited about doing that. We have a bunch of logging crews that do a lot of that work, and we also focus a lot on taking care of young forests and battling invasive plants. So I hope to be able to kind of bring I'm sort of the young rookie on the panel today, but I hope to kind of bring real-time, real-world, practical, what's going on right now with our company is 25 people, which seems pretty small, but it's pretty good size for Vermont. So to kind of bring that to the panel today. in terms of the future forest, I think, in a global market, and Joe, I like you're talking about the neighbors and where we move our different products, and a whole other country to the north that we rely on pretty heavily also. In that global marketplace, thinking about what Vermont can offer, and I think it's quality trees, it's quality hardwoods, quality pine. It's not massive production of volume. It's going to be, I hope, production of quality. And I think hopefully that will kind of guide part of our discussion today. Yeah, I'll hand it off.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Sean. And I'm Katie Fernholz, Executive Director at Dovetail Partners, like Joe said. My background, I'm in forestry. I'm a trained forester, and I've worked in forestry a little over 21 years. Most of my forestry work has been with private lands and family forestry. And I've had the opportunity, the privilege to work all across the country. And so certainly want to bring some broad perspectives of what I've seen in other parts of the country and how I think that relates here to Vermont. Some of the things from the Midwest, but also farther afield than that. And I think, as I look at the opportunities for Vermont, part of what comes to mind, there's kind of two things that come to mind. One is keep on doing what you're doing. I mean, Vermont has such a rich history with forestry, a long, deep, multi-generational history. So to me, that's one of the key things I think about for this state is what you're doing. Just keep on keeping on with what you're doing. Maybe more of it, or maybe some of the new opportunities. But that's one of the things I think about when I'm in Vermont, is there is a rich legacy here that is a core strength, and I would share that. And I also think, looking forward, making sure that the new emerging opportunities are part of growing that legacy. And what I see in some of the assessments and reporting that have been done for Vermont, there's just a lot of really good thinking going into the next vision for this forest, and I think that's exciting. Third thing is just being in the Midwest. One of the things I was talking with some people last night, there are still folks in the Midwest that talk about this region as back east. There's still a connection from the Midwest where we look over our shoulder and look to the Northeast and New England and see what you guys are doing. And one of the things as foresters and ecologists in the Midwest that we look at is the forest succession that is occurring in this region. Because what happened in this region in terms of forest recovery on land that had been cleared, and especially land that had been farmed or pasture, that kind of recovery of the forest, that's the same kind of thing that happened a generation or two later in the Midwest. So when we in the Midwest try to predict what might happen to our forest, we look east. Just what's happening with your forest and that forest succession, knowing that helps us predict. So when Joe's talking about the opportunity to look across borders and be collaborative, I think of course there's opportunities with adjacent countries and adjacent states, but there are opportunities to collaborate, across time zones.
Well, thanks. Good morning. Mike Snyder, Commissioner. By way of background, so I'm very proud to be Commissioner of FPR now in my 8th year, serving Governor Scott here. And how I got here, I was in the department for about 14 years. I served as county forester in Chittenden County, giving advice and guidance to landowners, et cetera, working with many of you. And so my career has been basically about 15 years in forest management, and prior to that, 15 years in forest science, principally at the Hubbard Brook Ecosystem Study in northern New Hampshire. I grew up in New Hampshire. I came to UVM to study forestry with great passion, and basically been here working in forestry in one way or another ever since. When I think about the forest, the future forest, I guess I begin with the premise that we don't want to go backwards. We want to be at least as forest strong as we are today, and we are very forest strong, benefiting from so many values and benefits of our forested nature and the reasons why we have a forest, which is the culture of forestry. So I'd say that's it for me, is that what I think forward to, what I sure hope we have, is we haven't gone backwards, and I guess the way I'd put it is, I'm hoping that we have a culture of forestry, a vibrant culture of forestry, meaning connected communities that truly embrace and value the importance of forests for all their benefits and the power of forestry, in keeping forest, and keeping those benefits going. So that's what I'm hopeful for, and I think there's a lot to do, and maybe most importantly is to maintain the culture of people of the land, from the land, and perpetuate it and grow it, because I think we're seeing signs of a disconnected populace on an awareness gap. And so that's my hope, is that in 50 years, certainly we have strengthened and grown our culture of forestry. Thank you.
Well, good morning again. Good to see all of you. It was great to be invited to your first summit last night. And I guess I got to thinking about, coming out here from the West. I've spent most of my career and my life in Montana. And what I really see is a lot of similarities to what goes on in a state like ours, in a state like Vermont, is that we are really so dependent on the natural resources that come out of our reflective states. Over the years, in my little company that I'm involved with, there's about 5, 6 of us, and every one of us, our passion is forest health, and we kind of set everything we do is around what's the best benefit for the forest and the byproduct. If you do that forestry practices right, you have working forests, the byproduct is jobs and a lot of good activity that goes along with it. I came out of a corporate background years ago, and we used to look at just kind of flip-flopped around that if you went out there and you went out and created jobs because you had a mill you had to feed, and the byproduct of that would be maybe some good forestry out of it. So I really like where the space I see kind of everybody, particularly here in Vermont. Montana's trended that way as well. So the whole forest health, sustainability is really important to me personally, important to our company, and that's how we operate. So I think I was invited here today is because one thing we do, a couple things we do. One, we publish a newsletter that goes out every Wednesday electronically. It's been going out for about 16 years now. And we're basically aggregators and curators of the stories that we pick up around the world. Mostly we try and find the success stories, but sometimes we have to send out on Wednesday mornings things that we don't really want to hear, but we probably should hear a little bit about. And I get my share of critique when we send those controversial things out there, and the phone rings and they said, Craig, why did you do that? And I said, well, have you heard about that before I sent that article out? He said, no, I hadn't heard about it. I said, well, that was the reason I did that, because I think, you'll probably take a real active position and maybe do something about that negative press. So anyway, our little company, we do a couple things. Like I said, we publish the newsletter. We also put on the International Mass Timber Conference, and we've been holding that for the last 3 years in Portland. We're really excited about all the technological advances and innovation that's happening in our sector right now. And so when we're putting our 4th one, will be coming up this coming March, and expecting around 1,500 people to be there, and hope some of you are. I know last couple of years you have been. And the last thing I guess I would say, just as an observation, when Christine asked me to come out here and share some of my thoughts of what's going on from my view around the world and my part of the country, I actually, after last night and being here for a couple of days, I think there's so much to learn from Vermont. I mean, everything we do in the West, it seems like when it comes to timber, it has to be at scale. But that's not really the most popular thing in our society right now. We're looking at, and I look at Vermont being this entrepreneurial state and figuring out how you take small businesses and do really well. I'm going to go back to our network and really advocate to take a look at this state. So sorry to be so long-winded, but really, again, pleased to be here, and thank you very much.
Great. So I guess one thing, to sum up what I heard, is we have a desired future condition of our forest and forest economy where we have a healthy, high-quality forest. We have collaboration amongst states and countries, and we have a connectedness to the people in terms of Mike's comment on the culture, forest culture. So with that kind of in mind, I want to talk about some of the unique kind of opportunities or challenges that face Vermont. Recognizing it's a small state, but it's a well-known state. And so I think, and I also, if you could, we got Alex and Mike are kind of going to be looking inside Vermont as Vermonters, and Craig and Katie, I'd like to have you think about, as you look from outside the state, what maybe Vermont has to achieve that goal. So why don't we start with Katie, and then we'll go to Alex and come this way.
Sure, well, I'll take you up on the offer to be the crazy outsider. You all thought I was crazy anyway. I live year-round in Minnesota, so I'm certified crazy, right? So, and I'll tell you, when I hear the word unique, and I think of what I from the limited time I've spent in Vermont over the years, had the opportunity to do some forestry work here, and in looking at, like I was referring to, the plans, the reports, some of the assessments that have been done, the thing in there that seemed unique and kept catching my eye was firewood. And I know that might sound crazy to fellow foresters, and I'm sure to Vermonters it's like, that is blasé, what could be interesting? But it's just one of those things, and especially with what you're saying, Mike, in terms of the culture and the connectedness in Vermont to the forest. When I kept reading about firewood, I just kept wanting to unpack it and understand more about what firewood means in this state, how many people, just the eyes and ears and the interaction that Vermonters have with that resource in that way, consistently, year to year, generation to generation. There's something unique there. And to me, I almost think of all of those people using firewood are part of Vermont's forest industry. They're stakeholders. And how do you leverage that population? And how do you cultivate that population? So, like I said, I'm the outsider, I can be the crazy one, and firewood. I think there's a nugget there that could be unpacked.
So Alex, you spend your days in the woods probably selling a bunch of firewood.
I was going to jump right off of that and just say something that's really exciting to me and a real unique thing in Vermont. And, I can kind of bring our company and what we do and make it pretty real, is that last year we sold wood to like 83 or 84 different unique vendors. So these are mills, firewood processors, paper mills, the whole range of things. 84 different places. A number of those are firewood processors, but that diversity of markets is pretty unique, at least region-wide. There are many places where there's one or two places where you can sell your wood. And here we have, I bet if we pushed it, you'd have 100 easily. So that's a real strength, I think, and it's based on, we have a diverse forest with 15 different species or maybe more. As I drove up the highway and started seeing tamarack and cedar along the edge, which we don't have in Westminster, there are a lot of species that are commercial species in Vermont. It's not 2 or 3 trees. And I think that diversity of markets probably comes out of that. And I think that's a real strength that, talking about the entrepreneurial world of quality wood in Vermont, what you can do with really nice sugar maple, really nice oak. It's really exciting, and I think that can be kind of part of this future forest vision, is continuing to work with all those, huge international mills that are, open and closed because some investor somewhere else decided something, all the way down to, 1 or 2 man custom sawmills where we also send a lot of wood.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so challenges and opportunities, as I see it from within.
Yeah, that are unique to Vermont.
Well, I guess I'd say it's one number to represent all. Give or take a few. One number is 625,000, 630,000. That's the number of us, we Vermonters. It's a challenge. It's a strength. I'll start with the strength in that we're small and we're still a human scale. And I think community-based, and we can come together and talk with each other, mostly in a civil way. That's a great strength. And we do have a challenge with this awareness gap and the connectedness problem, but we still have a heritage, as Katie has noticed, and others, Greg, a legacy of understanding the land and our connection to it. But the challenge is the same, is that there's not very many of us. And there's challenges of scale in the other direction, I'd say. So I think that's unique to Vermont in a lot of ways, that we benefit from our size, and we also struggle with the lack of power that comes with. I often put it this way, just look at New Hampshire. I'm guessing a mile of road, just as a proxy for a lot of things, to build and maintain a mile of road in New Hampshire, I'm guessing it's pretty similar to a mile of road in Vermont. And they have more than twice as many people to pay for it. We're at a disadvantage in that way. So, and I know this is one of the governor's priorities, is to grow our workforce and our population with, and I like to think that connected to the land, forestry, recreation that's supported by forests and forestry is an attractor for a new demographic of people that can help.
Yeah, no, that's, all three of you are very interesting. I think what I look at, I'm not familiar enough with your state to really know what, some solid issues are or that you asked me to address, but I think one thing that's in common I see almost everywhere I go, and I had an interview with a couple small operators between Boston and here a couple days ago, and they all brought up the same issue I hear in Montana and on the West Coast, is that our forests are really fairly unhealthy. I mean, we've got a lot of issues there, so I think that is one of the issues, but it's also the opportunity, and I think the Job Summit having this forest industry sector network being put together, the government's commitment, 2 bills he's going to sign later, those really enhance the opportunity to work to get your forest healthy, to create markets, and I think they're at a real advantage because compared to where we're at in Montana, we have 1 million people in a great big state, and you have 600,000 with, fairly small landscape. But Montana, our nearest major market is 600 miles away, and I think your opportunities, your markets, the major ones, are right, not very far away, particularly as crows fly. So those are the couple things that come to my mind.
Okay, interesting. So Vermont currently has this unique diversity of markets. We still have a community that's connected to the land, firewood, small state. I'm curious, with that in mind, and Mike, you made a comment about not wanting to go backwards. So with that in mind, what's the role of government, and we'll get to the role of private industry as well, but let's start with, what's the role of government in at least being sure that we don't go backwards, that we maintain some of the things that we like, but also create an environment that moves us forward to this desired future condition. So Alex, I'm going to have you go last, Mike. Alex, why don't we start with you, and also if you could touch on thinking about your experience with current use. Katie made an interesting comment last night that Vermont, in her opinion, Vermont and Wisconsin have probably the 2 strongest, robust current use programs in the country. I hadn't heard somebody state it so plainly.
I stand by it.
Yeah. Yeah, thinking about the forest, and the forest is not only the place that we do activity, but it's also the place that I chose to come to Vermont to work. And so I think keeping that in mind is attracting young, motivated people to come to Vermont. We have a big forest. The scale is pretty nice. I was working in Connecticut as a forester before, and the scale is different there, and the culture is different there. And I specifically moved to Vermont to work in the forest. So I think it is an attraction. I think developing a workforce of people working in the forest is a big challenge. I think government probably has a pretty good role to play there. Our company, cut-to-length mechanized logging crews. So we have a lot of 26 to 35-year-old people running huge fancy machines. There's not a lot of kind of introductory level forest jobs or training. And how do we get that going more? I think that's really important, and I think it's a key. I think it ties immediately into forest health. A lot of timber stand improvement work or cleanings and just dealing with invasive plants and things. These are jobs that get you really interested in the forest and how forests grow. They have immediate impact. They pay long-term dividends. And they're also a great way to get young people into the woods before they're sitting behind the controls of a fancy machine cutting down trees. They know what a quality maple looks like when it's this tall. I think that's really important. Government-wise, supporting education at like the VOTEC level, at the high school level, and at the university level, I think that's a really important thing. Looking across different places that have forest economies, look at Swedish Forest Academy, where you have kids who are 17 years old, with their protective equipment and their chainsaws, and they're learning, and then they're running a forwarder, and then they're learning how, it's an incredible training ground for people. We don't really have that. And so I could see that as something really nice. 3 of our production crew logger guys have come out of high school forest programs. And that's really great. They're awesome guys. They've had a great exposure to that. And they come right in and, they don't know how to run the machine right away, but they have kind of the background to get into it a little bit. So I think more of that, I guess supporting education would be my biggest push for how government can be doing that. And I'll leave the awesomeness of current use maybe to the middle guy here.
Good, and I would completely support the education role, so you nailed it on that. I would second that. The things I'd add in terms of the role of government, one thing I see in many states is the government often, in Vermont's no exception, you do a great job of collecting data and information about the forest. But what's often missing is enough detail to really inform investment and business making decisions. That's a level of forest inventory and data that a lot of states don't necessarily provide. And I do think there's a role of government to provide that at a statewide level, so businesses don't have to go search that out. And it can really facilitate investment when there's that greater level of detail available about the resource. The second thing, the role of government in having good forest policy, and the measure to me of good forest policy is it references back to forest science. There are a lot of states that enact different forest policy that's very prescriptive, really ties the hands and dictates what happens with the resource, and doesn't allow for the evolving insights of science. And so I think there's a role for government to really create baselines, level playing field, shared understanding of how the forest is going to be cared for, but it has to link back to the science and make sure that the science drives the decision making. And one of the key ways to make that happen is making sure that foresters and forest ecologists and people trained in forest science are helping with that policy advocacy and that policy development. There's a lot of states where foresters would rather be in the woods, and they don't necessarily engage in those conversations, but you can't connect the policy to the science if you don't have that expertise in the room. And
so Katie, along the lines of the data that the state or government could provide and collect, are there any examples of places that are doing that are working in your view?
Domestically, I look at the states in the Southeast and what they've been able to do to support investment. They've drilled down deeper than the FIA. FIA program, what the Forest Service provides through the Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, is brilliant information. That program needs to be funded, needs to be fully funded. We need to maintain that program at the highest levels. But it's a broad scale, and you need to drill down deeper into the forest resource. And so domestically, you look at the Southeast region, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, some of those states, what they've done. And internationally, to me, the poster child for good forestry data that supports business investment is Finland. Finland, I think they've just about barcoded and named every tree.
You can go last, sorry.
I wasn't ready though. I thought you were going to go next. But no, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think the role of government, in my mind, is kind of a facilitator. In my mind, the government doesn't solve anything. People do. And I think this group here today is a testament of that. I mentioned it last night, and Mike mentioned it, our master of ceremonies here a minute ago, that we've got such a diverse group in here to me, it makes it really easy for government policymakers to help move the ideas that are in a room like this, because it's not one-sided. And so, anyway, I just see the government, their role as a facilitator. I commend Christine, Jobs Fund, and everybody that, you know, I really believe in networks. Our company name's got network in it. And I think what was pulled together here brings diverse audience and group together to discuss the opportunities and the challenges that, and the governor being here in this room showing that particular commitment. I think between private citizens, the government in the room, you can solve any problem you want to.
Okay, Mike, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to start by kind of splitting the word out a little bit. I think of it as like the role of government. I think of there's government agencies, and then there's governing in my mind when I'm thinking of this. So the role of government agencies like ours, I would say, is these guys have captured it quite well. Convening, facilitating, being a clearinghouse of impartial, accurate, science-based information, guidance, also connecting with research and kind of being on top of things and current and making that available. Kind of a clearinghouse, if you will, for information and guidance. That's a good role, and that will help us get to the desired future conditions, that sort of thing. But I think it needs to go beyond a forest agency to include, you know, workforce development is key. There's so many other economic implications. So labor and commerce, you know, all agencies of government could play a role here, and I think maybe it's on me to try to do more of that. How do we plant these seeds, I guess, reasonably pun intended, for growing our forest economy outside of our role at forest parks and recreation, right? To help convene the other agencies and make them aware that there's co-benefits and shared priorities here. Then there's the government, which is kind of the policy making, policy setting. We get to play a role. The governor sets the agenda, and we get to try to push for that. And I certainly rely on our staff to help me, inform me about how do we push for that under the governor's priority. Think of what are the policies that promote workforce, that promote healthy forests, that science-based. I love to think that we're going to be, like to think of FDR and all the way up through the government. Our approach to forest and forestry is grounded in science, guided by experience, because you got to have both. That's my take on government. We have 150 people here. I'm guessing there's at least 150 different answers on the role of government. Right, Bill? You're right.
So, Craig, everybody touched on people, and so I want to think about maybe what keeps you up at night. Like, what's the thing that you're most worried about? And I just want to read something. Rob Riley from the Northern Forest Center had a great blog post just last week, and it was titled "Eat Kale, Use Wood," and it was great. And his whole point was that we've done such a fantastic job on the agricultural side of really connecting people to where their food comes from, understanding the benefits of our local farms. But his comment was that farms are only 20% of our landscape in Vermont, or smaller. It's a very small part, and forests are all around us. So the thing that keeps me up at night, and then I'll kick it off to you all, is that people, you know, I think a number of people said this last night, is that the forest products industry has a great story to tell. I'm going to say that I think we've done a horrible job telling it. We just haven't. And so my concern is that people will get further and further away from that good story as we go through generations. So that's what keeps me up at night, is losing that connection. So thinking about the forest that we all want to have 50 years and greater from now, what concerns you most? I didn't give these guys a heads up I was going to ask that question.
Okay.
No, whoever wants to take it.
I'll go first. So, we have 40 years of the current use program in Vermont, 100 years of scientific forestry, we'll call it. I don't think we're doing a good enough job 10 tending young forests and getting them pointed in a good direction. I think about our company, and I think I'm as a consultant describing things on the landscape. I'm as guilty as everybody else, but we harvested. Am I out? Better? No. I'll just speak loudly. We regenerated something like 250 some acres last year. Not a huge amount of land. Tending of forests, we probably did a tenth of that. So when you're really honest about tending of forests and pointing in a good direction, it's a tiny percentage. It's just a little drop in a big bucket of forests that need a lot of work to potentially. Is it back on?
Just talk louder.
I'm not a great shouter, so my take-home point there, what keeps me up at night is we're not tending young forests enough to make sure that in 50, 60, 80, 100 years we have really quality trees to base the industry off of. I guess it's dead.
I know, good. So,
Katie can shout.
I can shout, you know that, Sean. Yeah, I got a story about that. But yeah, you didn't warn us about this question. I'm glad you didn't, or I might not have slept last night. But what keeps me up at night is the forest sector in this country is just waking up to the fact that we have a great story to tell, and that story is about to change. We've been in a luxury period of forest recovery in this country with stable forest area, growing forest inventory stocks, harvests much less than mortality or growth rates. These kinds of, the story has been great. That story is about to change. You saw the headlines last week on our national forest. Not a big surprise to those of us that watch this, but we have negative net growth on our national forest in this country now. And so the headlines about forestry are about to change just when we've started to understand our good story. And that absolutely keeps me up at night, because the last few years, forestry has been able to tell this great story, bring people into the tent, grow our stakeholders, build up trust and faith. And our story is changing, not because of our actions, but because of development expansion. The greatest expansion of soybean production in the recent years has been in Kentucky, in the heart of hardwood country. We're seeing agricultural expansion in parts of this country, as well as housing expansion. So losing forest area is starting to reoccur. Increases in mortality that exceed growth is starting to occur. And it's how we stay, we're going to move from a short honeymoon period of a great story to tell to potentially back on our heels, back in a defensive position. And I think it behooves all of us to try and stay ahead of that and continue to raise the awareness that the land use change we're seeing is not because of forestry. It's all of the other things that forestry has to compete with. And we have to tell that story. And we have to leverage the trust we built in the last few years to bring the partners along to understand the pressures we face. But if you can tell, this keeps me up at night, because we have a very good story to tell. But pretty soon, the data is going to say our story is out of date. And so how do we stay ahead of that?
Well, I guess I struggle with this one. I'd say I work hard, I play hard, and I sleep really well. I share a lot of these concerns, and I guess for me, it's we've been talking about it a lot. And in addition, it's the fear that Vermont will become, in the relative near term, kind of just a landscape of suburban sprawl with people like from anywhere and aren't of the land. And maybe worst case, that we just become, maybe we're still pretty and green, but we're just a theme park version of ourselves, and we're not an authentic place of connected people with the land.
Well, now that I get to go last, they covered everything I was going to talk about. But I'll kind of reiterate what Katie and all the rest of you just said, is that what keeps me up at night is the whole development issue and lack of land planning. We see it in the west, we see it in the east, and you can take and You can clear cut, you can log, you can thin forest, you can burn them, bugs will eat them. They always grow back. But if you develop the land, subdivide it up, it never comes back. So that's what keeps me awake, and it's just kind of reiterates what the rest of the panel said.
Great. So I have one more question, and then we're going to open it up to you all for questions. Being that this is the Vermont Forest Industry Summit, I often think of the flow, the value chain. Are we pushing things up the value chain, or are we creating a pull? And I think we want to create a pull where people want to use wood. They make a conscious decision to choose wood over other things. And so I'm curious, and I'll just throw it out, anybody can take it, is what role does industry play? We talked about government, we talked about our desired future conditions. So what can we all do as private business owners, foresters, mill owners, to create that pull, which then hopefully will lead to better tending of the forest, and more connection to the land. So I'll throw it out there. Anybody can take it.
Well, I heard one thing earlier from, I think, all three of you, is that I think education is so important. I think our companies right now, worldwide in the industry, everything I hear every day is I can't get enough employees. So that tells me we're not investing enough in youth to have a workforce to fill the needs we need in our companies. But also seeing kind of some recent developments that, you know, I think the forest products industry and ag people are the most creative people in the world. So they're already, I'm seeing mills in Montana and mills in the east that are actually kind of starting, you know, the old on-the-job training, and then they're investing in their employees by, they see a good one that's worth making an investment in, paying tuition to go get a degree in electrical or whatever it might be, computer sciences. So I think the whole education piece is where our industry could really make an investment right now.
I'll take a crack at it. Build on what Craig said here. Think about the innovation and creativity. I believe that the folks who work in the sector are characterized, can be characterized that way, and but they have to have an environment in which innovation is encouraged and rewarded. So that has to happen too, where we have to have, you know, say costs in line, synced up with the value of the products. It's a little bit out of balance. It's very expensive to do business. And also a regulatory structure that truly reflects our belief that it's good and that it's helpful to keeping Vermont so beautiful and green. Until we have those two, I don't think you have an environment where somebody wants to come and innovate. I believe if we have a welcoming culture and environment that way, those innovators will respond to it in a big way and capitalize on emerging products and new markets, et cetera. And that's how I see it.
I think building the forest brand of Vermont is going to be something that the industry association could really help drive forward. Like talking about kale, how about sugar maple? When you think about Vermont, being not from Vermont, I think about skiing, I think about maple syrup. And I tend to think more and more about recreation. Why don't I immediately think about high quality wood products? And I'm pretty in it as far as your average person goes. And so I think that branding and that labeling and those, that's going to be a small portion of the wood that's coming out of the forest, but it's high value and it has a great value chain story and it has a lot of great pictures of awesome people making things along the way that I think that story needs to continue to be told. And I think tie it to Vermont, like maple, sugar, awesome wood, here's this product, let's do it.
I don't know if this is working, but you're supposed to hold the mic at least, right? Whoever's holding the stick is it's a tough question because there's so many different cultures and in different businesses. But I think that the thing that comes to mind for me with the role of business is I think it's it's necessary in business sometimes to just kind of put your head down and take care of your business and the day-to-day work. And it's hard for business operators to pick their head up, look around, and and see what's going on in the context that they're trying to operate in, and they're just trying to keep things going. So to me, that'd be the thing is the businesses that have the luxury and have the capacity to participate in things like this and to think about how to do more together. I think that's a really important role of business because it's impossible for any other entity, government or nonprofits, advocacy groups, to know what business needs unless business can articulate it. We can't read minds. Sometimes we guess really badly. So I think businesses that have the capacity, have the bandwidth to articulate their own needs, however they can do that, that's a really important role. And participate in the opportunities that are available. Your original premise too, Sean, about whether it's supply or demand or what, you got to do both. And I think what we've seen in the last few years with the innovation is the demand, there's some new demand stuff that's happening that's really exciting. I mean, the CLT stuff, wood energy stuff, there's some new demand stuff that's really exciting. But to me, when I step back, it's happening in part because the supply is abundant. We're at a point in this country where we have a lot of standing forest inventory. And so those two things are working together in my mind in terms of what we're seeing as a renaissance. It is supply and demand coming together in a really powerful way.
Great, thank you. So I believe now we've left some time to open up to you all, some questions or thoughts. We have a microphone that I believe is going to be run around. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. Great.
Go over to the mic.
Oh, you want folks to stand up like a town hall meeting? Great. Form a line.
Sign up and read the list today. So Katie touched on what I wanted to bring. Name, rank, and serial number. All right, for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Rob O'Holler, and I'm a consulting forester. I work mostly in southern Vermont, a little bit into northern Vermont and the adjacent states. I have a couple of employees. We manage about 50,000 acres of timberland for small, non-industrial owners for the most part, and we get around a little bit. All right. Thank you. Does anybody have trouble hearing me? No. I will try to use the microphone. I don't know if we're recording this. We got a camera and everything. So Katie touched on a train wreck that we're coming to. And when we talk about the condition of Vermont's forest in 50 years, we have to look at what's going on in the last 50 years and how things are going. And we've had this increasing stocking level, and what's come with that is an increasing mortality rate. And I have heard almost nobody talk about this. So our mortality rate has doubled in the last about 35 years. And it will probably double again so that we're headed towards negative net growth. And that's coupled with the fact that our harvest levels are actually declining, which is making it worse. So we regenerate about 1/3 of 1% of our forest each year. So we're headed towards an age class train wreck. So I would predict that in 50 years, our forests are going to be about 37 years older on average, because we're only regenerating this small percent. So there are wildlife impacts to that. The Vermont deer hunting is not what it was 30, 40 years ago. Grouse hunting, I used to love hunting grouse, and they're just not out there unless you get up to the Northeast Kingdom here. So, and that fits in with the markets. So our harvest levels are declining. We'd like to be selling these high-quality wood products, but to sell high-quality wood, to grow high-quality wood products, you have to harvest the low-quality wood products. I think the state missed an opportunity with biomass a few years ago when a study was done on the sustainable amount of biomass that would be available for large-scale electric production. And you start with the growth rate, and you say, well, this much is good quality, we're not going to chip that, and this much is unavailable, so we're not going to chip that, and this much is on sensitive sites, so we're not going to chip that. So this is the biomass that's available, and then, well, we really shouldn't use that much for electricity, so this is how much is available. But what we didn't account for is 100 years of growth exceeding harvest that this sits on top of. So rather than an annual harvest of, I think the committee came out with an 800,000 tons per year number, which would have kept 2 big biomass plants going. If you just look at the excess stocking in Vermont's forest overall, if trees didn't even grow, we could fuel 10 large-scale electric plants for 80 years, just without even any growth. So then we had a proposal for 2 biomass plants in Vermont, and neither one of those broke any ground. So we missed an opportunity, and that was just before Maine lost quite a bit of pulp capacity. And so now we're scrambling to get rid of low grade. New Hampshire now has a crisis with their political situation and probably the loss of most of their biomass opportunity. And so I think that our forests are going to be not close to what we'd like them to be in 50 years because of all these things.
So then that gets to the role of policymakers and people wanting more from their forests, whether that connection to the wood, understanding that using our forests the way we talked about and having that connection. And I think that maybe that's what you're seeing, right? Is that people don't fully understand the details, and that's our story
So we make
to tell.
these choices from a policy standpoint, and we're not looking at this big picture. So I'm glad we're looking at that big picture today. Thank you.
Carbo?
Rich Carbonetti, I'm a senior VP for Lambeth Timberlands, been a consultant and lived in Vermont for 40 years. We manage about 2.2 million acres across the Northeast. Lived in the same town here in Vermont since 1980, and I've watched this slow rural attrition occurring. It's not just in Vermont. It's more evident in the kingdom in Vermont than it is in other places, but all across the region. And then conversely, I travel through Quebec quite a bit. And I travel through these beautiful little towns all through eastern Quebec, and there's a difference. And I'm curious about what everyone's thought is this, and what I see is this wonderful partnership in Quebec between business and government. And what I see in New England, this conflict between business and government. And I work in 5 states, and Vermont's the toughest one to do business in. And Mike and I had an interesting chat about this. And it's not universally true, but there are pretty strong examples of it where we've lost facilities because of our permitting processes and things like that. So there's this great vision that you're all expressing about this future. We have this great resource. But I don't think we have a government that really understands it very well, to be perfectly honest. And we certainly don't have business willing to cooperate with government as well as they do in Quebec, where you see it's just marvelous little towns, neat, clean, everybody making a good living, businesses being successful, reinvesting. So I'm curious about your thoughts about that.
I'll take it on from the outsider. I can see things more government. And totally agree, Carbo. And the short answer I'd give is we need to commit to a trust building exercise. It's absolutely rational right now that business and government don't trust each other. Come on, give me a break. Has anyone been reading the newspaper for the last 10, 20, 40 years? There's absolutely good reason for distrust between the public and private sector. So we have to recognize that's what it is. It's distrust. And you can't collaborate if you don't trust each other. So how do you build trust? You get people around the table, you have advisory groups, and you really listen to what they say, and you start creating the environment where you do what you say you're going to do, you show up, you follow through, you build trust. So that would be what I would say, is got to kind of admit that relationship's broken down. Let's go to some marriage counseling, and let's make this thing work.
I'm going to add to that I think I reflected on this earlier in another question about a new approach to our regulatory structure, especially where forest processing businesses are concerned. You get to trust through understanding, and we have to have a better understanding that a mill, a kiln, a firewood processor, whatever it is not the same as another big box store gobbling up land at a disproportionate rate. It is supporting a healthy landscape. It's a manufacturing facility. It needs to be sited appropriately and managed well, but it needs to be seen as supportive and helpful to the greater good, not as just another development project. So I think that's part of getting us to a regulatory scheme that actually supports a viable, robust forest economy.
So I'll add something to that too, because I think that's a really good point. The states that we work in around the country, I think successes that I see are places where there's opportunities and structure where policymakers and industry are regularly taught, right? And it's not just the forest products industry, but I'm thinking of that industry. And the states that I feel of as like having the most conflict don't have those regular interactions that are scheduled and part of policymakers' routine. So I haven't done business in Vermont in a long time, so I don't know what exists currently. But I know Wisconsin, the governor has it's the Governor's Council on Forestry, and it's made up of a wide variety of the forest products industry, and it's a regular kind of sounding board for all things forestry, and it's been very successful. Barbara?
The follow-up is that I think Mike's sitting here thinking about this. We have started a private lands advisory committee, which I think is a really important first step. I happen to be chairing it now, and we are having that dialogue, but it's really the first time in a long time that we've done that. We used to have the Forestry Communications Council back in the 80s, which I happen to chair as well. And the key thing is that when you get people together, then you start realizing similarities. And I think our industry has done a remarkably bad job, both on the public side and the private side, of focusing on our differences instead of focusing on our collaborative efforts and the successes we've had together. And it's a shame, because I saw this in legislative testimony on our forester licensing, where it was a universal goal to move the profession, the industry forward, but yet people focused on the few negative potentials. And I think we do a lot of that, and we waste a lot of energy. So I'm hopeful that we can mimic what some of those other states have done.
Great.
I'd just like to step up and I can make enough noise. Ken Gagne, did I jump the gun?
Oh, you good?
All right, so I've run a family sawmill, been in Vermont since 1880, not myself. Looking good. And I've been to a number of these meetings, and the thing I'm seeing tonight, or today, is we've got the presence of private and government representatives. And the trust is what we need to build. And I think the thing I'd like to say is we've been talking the talk, and we need to start walking the walk. And I'm putting the gauntlet on the table of the State Department of Forest and Parks to sit down with us in the industry. We've come to a number of times and we keep saying, the state of Vermont has control over, I'm going to be broad, say 400,000 acres in the state. And that's a big piece of our working landscape. We in industry are struggling to see a consistent flow of material available. I'm a little mill, and there's a number of other of us mills, and we really need to rely on reliable forest products to be harvested. And we need to see the state step up to the plate, put some more sales out there, make those sales doable. So we can get these young people in, because a number of times the sales are not easy. The sales go through a lot of bureaucracy, and I know how hard it is in a state that has a lot of people to pack. But I think we've got to see public sector pick up the stake, put some more, keep some timber. I'm going to just say, and I've said it to the feds who have the same amount of land. We've got two entities that have a big chunk, probably 20 to 25%. You folks can you need to put more wood out there for us to work, because then we go week to week. So that's my 2 cents.
I suppose it's on me to respond, at least to some extent. Thank you, Kenny, and we've talked about this before, and I would like to say, we're happy to do our part. I think in our forestry division, our staff really like to do that. not because we have an aversion to it. And in fact, we have a pretty steady timber program that's been increasing. And what I think I really want y'all to know, lest you think me talking about a lack of connection and an awareness gap is just a bunch of hot gas, it's not. We've put out a proposed long-range management plan for Camel's Hump Management Unit, 23,000 acres, including increased harvesting. And we've gotten an enormous amount of pushback from folks who just don't want us to do that. And so we need all this story and all that it's not a matter of just putting blue paint on trees. It's a big deal, and we are up against it. So I hear you. We want to do that. We see a role for the role that state timber has played in the local economies. We're proud of that. We want to keep doing it. It's just not as easy as running after trees and putting paint up. We have to do this in a publicly accountable way. And sorry to say it, there's more of them now than there are of us. So we have to turn this, and we need your help to do it.
I want to just share something because I think it's also important in this conversation. Business absolutely needs to have stability and predictability in the available supply. Absolutely, absolutely. I think we limit our imagination when we think that's just the responsibility of public lands. So in Minnesota and Wisconsin, I'll start with Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have federal, state, county, tribal, and private land. And when the market dips, it's the private landowners that are least willing to sell when the stumpage value goes down. So we look to those public landowners to hold the line and maybe even increase if they can. And that creates some tension in Minnesota because most of the county, the state's hitting their targets, the counties, they even picked up a little bit in the last few years. The tribes have been hitting their targets, feds, not so much. But it puts pressure on those public landowners. You go across the border into Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a very similar mix. State, federal, county, tribal, and private. And one of the things Wisconsin has done through their current use law, it's called the Managed Forest Law, MFL law, is the landowners that sign up for that have mandatory practices written into their forest management plan that are scheduled. So even if the market dips, those private landowners have to contribute their fair share of wood to the market. So I think it's really important when we think about that need of business to have stable, predictable supply. You don't just look at public land managers. There is a role. In states like this, where 80% is privately owned, you can't overlook that, the importance of that, and the ways to manage that, the way to incent that.
So I'm getting the wrap it up signal. And we do have a very full agenda.
We do have maybe time for one quick question.
You're going to get in trouble.
I'm going to get in trouble. I'm Steve Hardy, private consultant forester, Vermont forestry, work in Vermont, Hampton, Massachusetts, and New York State, around 125,000 acres. Fierce competitor against Bravo. I love driving by. Hey, Rob, I'm checking out wood lots. Seems like that's friends, so we can do that and laugh. And I'm also president of Vermont Forest Products Association. I'm from a mill family that's been in business for 80 years. So I have quite a varied background. This is all I've ever done. I didn't work for other businesses. I wasn't working in the tunnel or anything like that. I've been doing timber and stuff since I was 14 years old.
Speak up, Steve.
Okay, but my point is that I want to talk about is that one thing that a lot of people have a problem with that I don't quite understand is what do people have against baby trees? We talk about regeneration, and everybody wants to look at the big ones. They don't want to look at the baby ones. The interesting thing, when you walk through with private landowners, through the forests, through a regeneration cut, and they're walking through this shit, and they're going like this, and they're pushing it out of the way. That's brush. They only realize that it's trees when they have to walk around it. Then it's a tree. So we have to do this public perception of what is young forest and how we need it. This whole thing about mortality that Rob was talking about, which is back of the envelope stuff, but if you do the math, he's right. He's right on what he's saying about the mortality and what it's going to be like. The Forest Service has known about this. They were shocked when Rob called them about the FIA data. What? You're actually looking at this? Great, can you get your phone number? Because they want to call them back. Because it's like you have all these little people sitting in this little dark room coming up with all this data, and nobody's looking at it. So that's one thing. The other thing is, too, is that private property has been the success of the forest industry in the Northeast. Because we know the public lands can be a shit show. That's the honest truth. Look at Colorado. You go out there, there is no forest products industry. There is no sawmill there that is half the size of Lamel Sawmill in northern Vermont, and they're a little pine mill. Colorado does not have the ability to manage their forests. Look at the mortality of the pine bark beetle in Colorado. It's gonna burn. We've seen fires all over the West Coast because of the public lands, and the industry has left the Pacific Northwest. It's a shell of what it used to be, and now it's burning. And they need industry to move in there, but the industry cannot rely on the U.S. Forest Service to really supply the resource they need to run their mills. So who's going to invest $200–300 million in a mill if they don't know they're going to get the inventory that they need to run the mill? So they're not going to do it. But here in the Northeast, we go through these ups and downs with governmental things, which is a big problem, but it's not as big. But at least we have the land and private ownership. And I have clients that have owned the land for 220 years. And the last thing they're going to do is, pillage and that land that they have. And they don't do it. Private landowners, on the whole, the vast majority want to do it right, and they are doing it right. And so we're going through these little ups and downs, like with this low-grade wood. Right now we're having a pause. We're able to move it all, and it's all going well. So just think about what's wrong with baby trees.
All right, with that, one closing statement I have is that what I've heard is that we need to focus on the people part of our forest.
I would agree. And I want to thank the panel. You guys did a great job. Okay, and on that note, with the people, I was driving around the other day and I was listening to an ad about the Vermont Symphony Orchestra, and the title of their summer series is The Fruits of Nature. And it got me thinking, how many of those people that might listen to that ad or go to those concerts and they hear the term fruits of nature will think about harvesting trees? Probably not many. But anyway, it'd be great to get that message out to them. Before our next speaker comes up, I would like to, I noticed that Senator Bobby Starr is here. He joined us from nearby Orleans. Senator, thank you very much. Mike, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. That was great. Once again, thank you for being here. As a forester, as a landowner, forest landowner, manager myself, and as commissioner, it's really great to be here and to see what's happening. And I want to thank so many who've helped do it, make it happen. In particular, if you'll indulge me, I'd really like to just quickly acknowledge some folks from our staff. I know there's a handful of them here: Paul Frederick, Matt Langlis, Dave Wilcox. Who am I missing? Can we get a hand of thanks for our staff? And now it's really a great privilege and an honor for me to be, as commissioner, to be able to introduce our speaker here. I just want to tell you that he's a true champion of the forest economy, and I'm really grateful that Governor Scott asked me to stay on as commissioner. And when he did so, we had a great chat about this, and he saw a real opportunity for rural economic development within his broad goals for the state through forestry and through outdoor recreation. He asked us to focus on that, and he asked us to work with you to do this. And in addition, he gave us extra horsepower, manpower really, in the person of Deputy Commissioner Sam Lincoln. I'd like to acknowledge Sam as well. I can't resist Sam, known these days as Scooter Lincoln. But really, it's as a symbol of the governor's commitment to this, to say, let's bring added capacity in the person of Sam with his particular experience and perspective and networks that we lacked and we needed, and it's been really helpful. So thank you, Sam, and thank you, Governor, for your leadership and your vision on this and your support. And with that, I'd like to introduce, to say a few remarks and then conduct signing ceremonies for two really important bills that so many of us have worked hard on. Please welcome Governor Phil Scott.
I haven't gotten too many of those standing ovations lately, so thank you. Really appreciate that. 20 years ago, I've said this before, I didn't have a political bone in my body, had no interest in politics whatsoever. I'm just like all of you here, struggling in business, trying to make payroll, wondering where the next job's going to come from, and all those sleepless nights being in business. I was in the excavation business for 30 years. But 20 years ago, I started complaining a lot about what they then were doing to me in Montpelier. And I finally decided to step up myself because I thought I need to add my voice. They didn't get it. They didn't understand all the obstacles they were putting in my way. By the way, they still don't get it every day, but we need more people. We need more common sense people with boots on the ground that have been through this to step up and run for office. So I would challenge all of you to do just that. And if you can't, offer your voice, your perspective, because it really is important. You get all different perspectives, and again, think back 20 years ago, and I really was naive about, and I ran for the Senate at the time, but it's been a worthwhile. I've been trying to be part of the solution ever since. But I still wake up with those same feelings of not having a political bone in my body many, many mornings, particularly lately. But it was, again, having different perspectives. I think about the 10 years I served with Bobby Starr. I believe we were probably the only two senators, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only governor that still has their CDL. I don't get to use it anymore, but I still have it. And I think, again, having that grounded look and feel for what we need is really important. I was listening to the panel. I thought it was interesting as well, and I think it was Katie. I don't know if she's still here. Yeah, but you mentioned your love of wood and so forth, but I wonder how many other state houses, state capitals, complexes are heated all with biomass. I think that's something we can be proud of. Look at all the schools we have. That Vince Aluzzi, I was on the institutions committee for a number of years. I chaired it. We forward so many different initiatives for biomass at that time. We should be doing more, by the way. But again, our schools are declining. But we can do some things in that regard that we have a lot to be proud of. Burlington, for instance, a lot of their power is derived from biomass. So again, we just need to build on that success. So I really want to thank Commissioner Snyder and everyone for having me here today. On my first day in office, I signed an executive order. It was only about 18 months ago, but I signed an executive order, and it was really pretty simple. It was about growing Vermont's economy, making Vermont more affordable, and protecting the most vulnerable. And as I look around the room and I listen to the panel, I believe this industry has a lot to do with all three of those and can accomplish a lot in that regard. So again, we just have to look for those opportunities. So again, having just listened to the discussion about the future of Vermont's forests and the forest industry, there's a lot to celebrate in the work that's already been done and a lot to look forward to in the work ahead, connecting those who earn their living from our working forests. And that's what's important, having these conversations and having the connections to grow the industry, which will help our economy as well as the environment and our public health. There are so many reasons to keep our forests healthy and productive, and I want to recognize the work of those who brought us here today. I really appreciate your efforts to help chart a course for supporting and rebuilding our forest economy, including the Working Lands Enterprise Board, their forestry subcommittee, as well as Commissioner Snyder, who's done a terrific job. And I was very thankful that he stepped up and wanted to serve under this administration as well. And then Deputy Commissioner Lincoln. He had not served in government in any capacity. He was in the forest industry with those boots on the ground, and I thought, this is somebody we need, somebody with that perspective that hasn't always come, a blend of the two, that hasn't always been part of government, and I think it's been really effective. And as well, the great team. I mean, it's a team effort as well, the great team at FPR. Without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. So there's also the foresters, the loggers, the truckers, the mills, the manufacturers, and the woodcrafters who have given their time and expertise to make sure that our voices are heard. So today's summit brings together those who create and promote the forest economy and share a common purpose. And given this purpose, in this setting where we're surrounded by forests here in the Northeast Kingdom, I think it's an ideal place to celebrate the two bills that my administration, in conjunction with the legislature, put forward to support and enhance working forests in our state. So S101, that's the first bill, the right to conduct forestry operations. It protects forestry operations from liability as a public or private nuisance. Without this bill, the industry would be subject to claims of nuisance, which can impact or even prevent logging and other operations from happening, which, as we all know, would adversely affect our forest economy, our wildlife, our habitat, our air, our water, and soil resources. So it's tremendously important. This new law takes a balanced approach, providing legal protections for those who play by the rules while still protecting their neighbors. So in other words, it gives you the right to do your work as long as you're doing it right. And I think it's important because you do it right, you're professionals. The other bill, S276, is the Rural Economic Development Bill, and it has a wide range of provisions to help promote rural economic development. It focuses on agriculture, forestry, and outdoor recreation. So in regards to forestry, it includes Act 250 changes for forest processing businesses, which will allow sawmills under 3 million board feet to be processed as minor applications, making it easier for these businesses to operate. That's a big deal. Any changes to Act 250 is a big deal in this state, so you should be commended for doing that. It also amends the Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program law to reflect current practice, which includes support for forestry businesses and adds the Commissioner of Forest, Parks, and Recreation to that process. It also provides, and this is important, near and dear to my heart, being in the equipment business and everything, previously, it also provides a purchase and use tax exemption for forestry equipment, expanding on that sales tax exemption we established last year. And again, that's a big deal. I mean, it's difficult to get anything like that through the legislature, so you should be commended for your hard work in doing that. As well, it makes technical corrections to the current use program to ensure that this important program continues to operate effectively, allowing thousands of private landowners to keep their forest lands intact. And if you have any questions about any of that, in particular the current use program, I'm going to throw Commissioner Snyder under the bus and let him answer any of those.
I got you, boss.
Thank you. And lastly, the bill creates a sales tax exemption for modern wood boilers, making it easier for Vermonters to heat their homes with local wood products in an efficient and clean manner. So I want to thank the Senate Agriculture Committee. Senator Starr is the chair of that. And again, without his help, we wouldn't be here. It's like if everyone has the same goal and we're all trying to pull in the same direction, good things can happen. So we may have been at odds at the end of the session over little budget things, but we were on the same, just a few $1 million. But in this regard, we're working together, and so we really have to celebrate those successes because we get caught up. The media loves to report all the things that we're fighting about. But there were a lot of good things we did this year, and we're going to be talking about those over the next couple of months. But really, really good things happening in Vermont that we should be proud of. and will lead us to more prosperity in the future. But as well, Senator John Rogers was effective. Members of the House Rural Caucus, including Representatives Sibilia, Conquest, and Kimball, and there were many, many others who helped in trying to forward this industry. So again, I want to thank you all. This summit and these bills are just the beginning of these networks, these initiatives, and more legislative efforts to come. We'll just keep building on the success. So with that, I would like to sign the bills. It would be great to have a backdrop of a couple of few people and might be willing to have a picture taken with me while I'm signing the bills up there. Something I'm not going to get to do with the budget, but make sure you sign the right one. That was S-101. Now for S-276.
It's a long one.
You should have seen it before they finished it. Oh, I went through more iterations than any other bill I've seen.
Every first?